parties were, but we weren't, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Preston on your final supplementary.
Well, Mr. Minister, the opposition parties didn't make a decision on this. You did.
Order, please. Order, please. Just remind the honourable member you have to address to the chair and not directly to a minister. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. But I've made my point. Perhaps maybe Nova Scotians would have got on board with these games if they would have been more affordable and there wouldn't have been so much secrecy that persisted around the cost of these games. And why didn't the minister or the premier intervene much sooner? It's far along in the process, with over $7.7 million and more to be yet spent to resolve this issue, possibly some lawsuits. Who can guess? The loss to the taxpayers that could have gone a long ways to help communities in our province. Mr. Minister, do you now regret not being more involved in ensuring the budget for this game did not spiral out of control and it wasn't shut down sooner to save some of the $7.7 million plus that have been already wasted?
The Honourable Minister of Health Promotion and Protection.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'll say this to the member opposite, to all Nova Scotians. I'm proud of the decision that we made. It was based on due diligence. It was based on the fact that the province could not afford to continue with a games of $1.7 billion and all the significant risk that was associated with hosting these games. But, Mr. Speaker, what I will say to the member opposite, it is very disappointing that we weren't able to move forward and host these games. They would have provided a tremendous opportunity for Nova Scotia, but we weren't prepared to risk the financial stability of this province, nor was the municipality. That's why we made the decision we made, and I'm proud of that decision, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Halifax Fairview.
My question is for the minister responsible for the Insurance Act. Shirley McPhee is a loving wife, a mother of 4, and a grandmother of 9 from Stewiacke. On June 15, 2005, she injured her back as a result of a motor vehicle collision, and she still has not fully recovered. She cannot stand up straight. She can no longer carry out her daily routine. She depends on the assistance of her husband, Percy. Yet, because of the $2,500 cap passed into law in 2003 by this government, her injuries are deemed to be minor. My first question to the minister, what can the minister possibly say to Shirley McPhee that would justify a $2,500 cap in the face of her pain and suffering?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, one of the difficulties that has occurred in a number of these cases, and of course I'm not aware of the particular case in question, and would be glad to be made aware of the information. But one of the difficulties in these cases is that in many cases there needs to be diligent action by legal representatives to pursue the claims. And Mr. Speaker, that has been the system in Nova Scotia both before and after the cap, and it's the system today, and people need to pursue their claims. And it sounds to me, again, not knowing the facts of the case, as if this lady has a very good argument that it is not a minor injury and therefore not subject to the cap.
The honourable member for Halifax Fairview on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, that is absolute nonsense. That is absolute nonsense, Mr. Speaker. The minister knows very well that the regulations define minor injury in a way such as to remove any discretion from the court. The regulations define anything that is anything less than catastrophic as being minor. It's like defining any animal smaller than an elephant to be a mouse, Mr. Speaker. And we know from the recent Rossignol case in the New Brunswick courts that in the face of that statutory definition, the courts have no discretion to apply a merely commonsensical definition of a minor injury. So my question for the minister, Mr. Speaker, when will that minister and this government finally recognize that the $2,500 cap on pain and suffering is a disaster for Nova Scotia accident victims?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
With all due respect to the honourable member, Mr. Speaker, the honourable member knows better that our rules, Mr. Speaker, do provide a clear definition and only cover minor injuries, Mr. Speaker, and not catastrophic injuries, as the member has indicated. In point of fact, many Nova Scotians have not been affected by the cap, and it has not in any way affected claims for monetary compensation for lost wages and expenses and the kind.
The honourable member for Halifax Fairview on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Shirley and Percy McPhee have so far spent nearly $3,500 of their own money trying to get her back to the way she was. All they have received from the insurance company is a bit of money for travel. Any and all medical treatments are not being paid for by the insurance company. They're being paid through public health insurance. So whatever public health insurance isn't paying for, the McPhees are paying for themselves. So, Mr. Speaker, it has come to this. Accident victims in Nova Scotia, and indeed all Nova Scotians through the Department of Health, are subsidizing an insurance industry with profits last year of $7.2 billion. Mr. Speaker, when will this government stop making accident victims and all Nova Scotians subsidize an industry making profits of $7.2 billion? The
Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much. And again, through you, Mr. Speaker, to the honourable member. The honourable member knows full well that the insurance company profits are not necessarily generated in Nova Scotia and not necessarily generated from automobile insurance. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, the honourable member also understands that in any insurance scheme, Mr. Speaker, there is an obligation for people to seek compensation under the plan. And for example, Mr. Speaker, in Nova Scotia, there's a thing called Section B under the Insurance Act, Mr. Speaker, and Section B benefits are no-fault benefits that cover many expenses that Nova Scotians incur, Mr. Speaker. So I would ask the honourable member to perhaps refer those people to Section B of their insurance coverage.
The honourable member for Dartmouth East.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Tourism, Culture and Heritage. One of the lasting reminders of our Acadian history is the dikes that dot the province. In areas such as Grand Prairie, these dikes are a significant part of a historical park and heritage site. As such, they are monitored and protected to a degree. However, there are many parts of the province where these landmarks need the same monitoring and protection. My question to the Minister is, what plan does his department have to protect and recognize this important part of our heritage?
The Honourable Minister of Tourism, Culture and Heritage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And of course, heritage to this government is extremely important, significant within the province. Mr. Speaker, we have several programs through the Department of Heritage to assist areas in their endeavours. So I would suggest that the member at some point in time, if they could give me the information that relative to this particular situation, I'll pass it on to the department and seek any assistance I can get for them.
The honourable member for Dartmouth East on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll try and inform the Minister right now. Mr. Speaker, the King property in Wallace houses one of the only remaining Acadian dikes in that area. The owners are worried that these heritage assets will be lost to tide and time. They also worry that there is nothing to mark the location for tourists. They have tried to get help already from the provincial government, but haven't been able to stir up any interest at all. My question, Minister, is why won't this department work with the Wallace Museum and property owners to recognize and help preserve this piece of our heritage?
The Honourable Minister of Tourism, Culture and Heritage.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I beg to differ. The department does work with all community museums in the province. Mr. Speaker, if there is a situation here, then I'll bring this back to the Department of Heritage and ask them to contact the people involved, and we'll try to rectify the situation.
The honourable member for Dartmouth East on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, the department hasn't been working with this group of people, but Mr. Speaker, the local museum does see the value in this site. New Brunswick Acadian groups are also very excited at this discovery and the verification of this area as an authentic 18th century or earlier Acadian dike. So my question to the Minister is, why can't his department also see the value of this historic property and put forward some sort of assistance to mark and preserve this site?
The Honourable Minister of Tourism, Culture and Heritage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I said before, this province and this government recognizes the importance of all heritage sites in this province. We will work with the local community to recognize this area. But again, Mr. Speaker, I will take it back to the Department of Heritage to try to achieve some resolution to this particular issue. Thank you.
The honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Agriculture. Well, Mr. Speaker, we have to continue to ask questions to the House on hog industry. Time and time again, our office has received letter after letter, phone call after phone call, email after email, and the list goes on. Mr. Speaker, some sectors in the agriculture industry are in reasonable shape. The hog industry is not. They need help, a long-term plan, committed leadership from this government. My question to the Minister, given government's previous moderate support for the hog industry, can farmers expect the same in the future?
The Honourable Acting Minister of Agriculture.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the member opposite for the question. And indeed, we have supported the hog industry over the last number of years, yes. Mr. Speaker, to a tune of probably $21 million since 2000. Mr. Speaker, just in December, we announced $3.5 million that will be put towards retiring the farm debt for the hog industry, and many other programs that we have involved as well, Mr. Speaker. So, yes, definitely, we are supporting the hog sector, and we'll continue to in the future.
The honourable member for Kings West on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, Pork Nova Scotia had a plan. They developed a comprehensive strategy about 2 years ago that would have sustained the hog industry had the government adopted the strategies outlined in the plan. The industry might not be on the doorstep of collapse. The families involved are fighting for their livelihood. Last week, CBC Information Morning profiled Linda Tupper and her third-generation family farm who expressed the hope of future viability in the hog industry. When will you fight for her? My question to the Minister, what's your government's future plan for the hog industry in Nova Scotia?
The Honourable Acting Minister of Agriculture.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, there is $500,000 that will be that's in our budget this year to additional funding, I should say, that will be available to hog farmers. As soon as the members opposite will have their chance, probably in the next short while, to be able to support the hog industry as well as the agriculture industry as a whole. We look forward to that support, and as soon as that support is given, we will be able to give the money to the hog farmers.
The honourable member for Kings West on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Past funding provided by the province has not aided the pork industry the way it needed help. Hopefully, we will see more funding in the future for this industry that will be directed in the proper way to the farmers who need it, Mr. Speaker. Through the CASE program, the last support payments were based on the year 2003. This meant some farmers no longer in the industry received a payout, while farmers who did not use CASE received no support. My question to the Minister, will your government commit to provide funding to the hog industry and allow Pork Nova Scotia officials to manage this funding to the 50 remaining farmers?
The Honourable Acting Minister of Agriculture.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and again, thank you to the member opposite for the question, because it does allow me to let all members of the House know, and indeed all Nova Scotia and all Nova Scotians and hog farmers, that we have indeed heard the concerns of some of the farmers. I've had some phone calls over the last couple of weeks regarding the administration of that program, the issue of it being associated with the CASE program. Mr. Speaker, in discussions with the Premier and members of my Cabinet colleagues, we have decided to review that, and that's under consideration right now. Yes. And at some point in time in the very near future, we will have a decision on which way we will administer that program. Thank you.
The honourable member for Cape Breton Nova.
Mr. Speaker. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Community Services. The Federal-Provincial Affordable Housing Agreement was signed in 2002, but development and announcement of projects were slow to come. When projects finally did start to push forward, the province started to include some of its share of over $37 million in funding. In 2005-2006, over $10 million was budgeted for affordable housing last year. Over 19 was budgeted. My question to the Minister, how much of the province's share of Phase 1 of the Affordable Housing Agreement has been spent?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I thank my honourable colleague for the question, as I know it's near and dear to his heart, Mr. Speaker, as we've discussed on many occasions. Mr. Speaker, indeed, the first phase of the affordable housing provided for 928 units, Mr. Speaker, across this province, and all 928 have been committed, Mr. Speaker, and all of the dollars have been committed, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton Nova on your first supplementary.
Not how much was committed, how much was spent. Mr. Speaker, I will return to these financial years. As I mentioned in 2005-2006, $10.3 million was budgeted, but $3.5 million was not spent. Last year, $19.3 million was budgeted for affordable housing. Only $4.45 million is forecasted to be spent. I can tell you what this government has been spending and building: new affordable housing units in the Cape Breton Regional Municipality. Zero. My question to the Minister of Community Services, how can she explain grossly underspending the affordable housing monies available?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And again, to my honourable colleague who has brought this issue to my attention before, Mr. Speaker, I will reiterate that indeed all of the dollars have been committed, Mr. Speaker. What this government is able to do is make available, Mr. Speaker, those dollars. We then rely on the contractors and the labour market to be able to fulfill those commitments, Mr. Speaker, to have those units built. We have, Mr. Speaker, committed to 30 new rentals in Cape Breton, 104 rental preservations, Mr. Speaker, in Cape Breton, 65 home preservation projects, Mr. Speaker, and 3 rent supplements for students, Mr. Speaker, for a total of 202 in the Cape Breton region, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton Nova on your final supplementary.
Cape Breton Region and Cape Breton Region Municipality still has zero number of units built, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you're going to spend the money to build desperately needed affordable housing is one thing. Actually spending it is apparently another. It's a shell game and cuts by stealth, Mr. Speaker, and meanwhile the number of the new units in our provinces is virtually non-existent. My question to the Minister, how can Nova Scotians possibly trust her department to actually spend the money it has committed to affordable housing where it's supposed to go?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And again, to my honourable colleague, the commitment of this government is indeed one, Mr. Speaker, that we will keep, Mr. Speaker. We have we've made those funds available, Mr. Speaker. We now expect the developers, Mr. Speaker, to fulfill their commitments. When it comes to the home preservation and the supplements, Mr. Speaker, we have indeed provided those, Mr. Speaker. As I mentioned in estimates to my honourable colleague, the 4 units in Arashat, Cape Breton, Mr. Speaker, have been completed. Mr. Speaker, the other units that I referenced, the 104 in the Sydney area, Mr. Speaker, I have information that those will be completed by May of 07, Mr. Speaker. There are 6 more, Mr. Speaker, in North Sydney that I understand will be completed by July 07. And once the land issues for New Deal development in Sydney Mines has been resolved, 20, Mr. Speaker, in Sydney Mines will be available as well, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Shelburne.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture. Yesterday, this minister's counterpart in New Brunswick released an action plan for the development of a fisheries renewal framework for New Brunswick. Wow. The release of the plan is a follow-up to the New Brunswick Fisheries Summit held in February. The minister in New Brunswick has laid out the actions they are proposing in order to move their fisheries renewable process further, and the plan will be distributed to the communities and license holders for their comments and suggestions. My question for the minister is, what action are you taking to move the renewal process forward in Nova Scotia?
Right on.
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the member opposite for the question. And indeed, we are, Mr. Speaker, working with the federal government to deal with a new Fisheries Act that was tabled in the House of Commons in December. We're looking forward to, I guess, all members of the House of Commons to support that bill. It's to second reading. Once it gets into second reading, it will be coming around the province or around the country for people to, fishermen, people in the industry to make, and stakeholders to make make their recommendations and any changes that they may see to it. So yes, Mr. Speaker, we are working with the federal government to do this. Thank you.
The honourable member for Shelburne on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have been going around the province with my leader and other members of our caucus to meet with fishermen and community leaders to discuss issues and the fisheries. We have got on this boat when the tide was in, and it's now low tide, and you've been left standing on the wharf.
Right on.
I hope to compile what we have heard, and I'll be more than happy to share these results with the minister if he so desires. Mr. Speaker, my question for the minister is, where is his action plan for the development of the fisheries renewal framework for Nova Scotia?
On the wharf. The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm told that a rising tide lifts all boats. So, Mr. Speaker, as the honourable member would know, there's different issues in the fishery, and it appears, Mr. Speaker, that he's talking to different fishermen than I am. I meet a lot of fishermen. I've talked to a lot of fishermen over the last number of months. They all indicate to me that we do need a change to the Fisheries Act. The Act is 139 years old. There is changes that has to be made. Mr. Speaker, and I have committed to the honourable member as well as the member from Digby to do a day trip to Ottawa to meet with the federal minister to discuss the issues in the fishery, to discuss the new Federal Fisheries Act. And Mr. Speaker, I have been notified by the minister's office in Ottawa just this morning that meeting will probably take place the week of the 16th of April. So, Mr. Speaker, we are moving ahead. Thank you.
The honourable member for Shelburne on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I really don't think this minister or the entire government realize the importance of the fisheries to Nova Scotia. First, he has given his support to the new Federal Fisheries Act twice, stating he has heard from the many fishermen. I want to inform him, this minister, that this is contrary to what I've been hearing in our meetings with fishermen and community leaders. My question for the minister is, will he commit to identify major issues such as the lack of consultation on Bill C-45, the loan board access problems, and meet with fishermen and community leaders to develop a long-term action plan for Nova Scotia's billion-dollar industry?
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Yes, exactly, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member is quite right. I mean, the fishery is a very important part of the economy of the province of Nova Scotia. The fishing industry in the province of Nova Scotia generates $1.4 billion a year to the economy of Nova Scotia. And yes, Mr. Speaker, it is important. We support the fishing industry in this province. We do want to see changes to the Fisheries Act that will work, and we will work with the federal government to ensure that that happens. Thank you.
The honourable member for Digby Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Transport and Public Works. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to highways in Nova Scotia, saying conditions are deplorable would be mild. An employee from the Department of Transport made a comment last year that said many of our provincial highways are 7 years older than the national average. We all hear about from how the government is putting more funding into our roads, but Mr. Speaker, we're failing to see that. My question to the Minister, if the Conservative government is putting so much money into highways, why do people continue calling my office and complaining about them daily?
The anticipating Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm very pleased that the honourable member posed the question in the manner that he did. because he needs to understand that as a result of the severe cut that the Liberal government in the 1990s made to the transportation budget of this province, that we have quadrupled the highway budget, Mr. Speaker, quadrupled it since we came to office, and we're going to have to double that again before we make up the deficit that crowd created, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for Digby Annapolis on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, in statement made by the Premier, January the 4th edition of the Chronicle Herald, he commented on the federal counterpart's obligation to lend a hand to Nova Scotia's 100 Series Highway. And I quote, Mr. Speaker, "I think it's incumbent on the federal government to put more dollars into our province on 100 Series highways, given the amount of that they collect each and every year through the tax system on fuel." Well, Mr. Speaker, the 100 Series highways that are not even finished yet in this province. For 35 years, the people of Weymouth and Digby have been paying federal taxes for a 100 Series highway they don't even have. My question to the minister, when can we expect this so-called agreement for the building and rebuilding of all the roads in Nova Scotia?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and again, I thank the honourable member for the question. A week ago, tomorrow, I had a lengthy conversation with the Federal Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure, and Mr. Speaker, we addressed some of the items that are contained in the federal budget, and I'm led to believe, Mr. Speaker, that in the very near future, we will be at the table with the Government of Canada, and we will be able to present a very positive message to the people of this province with respect to infrastructure spending in Nova Scotia in the coming years.
The Honourable Member for Digby Annapolis on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, there are methods that we could be using here in Nova Scotia that could help problems of the environment and help rebuild our dirt roads in Nova Scotia. With approximately 900,000 used tires each year in this province, we could use a rubberized asphalt method or a similar process to help these roads out. There are approximately 150 kilometers of unpaved road in Digby Annapolis, and using the 900,000 old tires could help rebuild almost 17 kilometers of that road per year. Just think, in 7.5 years, we could have all these gravel roads in Digby Annapolis rebuilt if we could use this method, and this method has been proven. My question to the minister, will your government examine the processes such as rubberized rebuilt roads, which can make good roads and contribute to the health of our environment also by not having to burn them?
Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, one of the things that all members of the House have come to expect from the honourable member for Digby Annapolis is his very common sense approach to problems that exist in this province. Indeed. The rest is good too, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, the issue that he references with respect to being able to use commodities such as used tires in the way that he has identified is something that indeed the department did do. It was in 1998. They used chunks of rubber from used tires in a section of road in Digby County. The results appeared to be reasonably good. Part of the challenge with respect to using the tires, Mr. Speaker, is no different than the problem we have with respect to using gravel. You need to find the gravel in a location that's reasonably close to the road that you're attempting to build. And that would be the real challenge if we were to use tires on a much increased scale than currently is the case, is to find the source of tires that would be available. But, Mr. Speaker, to answer the honourable member's question, yes, we will look into it.
The honourable member for Halifax Citadel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister responsible for the Human Rights Commission. In August 2002, the Nova Scotia Building Advisory Committee released a discussion paper on barrier-free design. A few months later, the Building Advisory Committee gave up responsibility for accessibility issues, leaving the Human Rights Commission as the only body to hear complaints regarding accessibility for people with disabilities. My question to the Minister responsible for the Human Rights Commission is, what measures are in place to handle accessibility complaints by people with mobility challenges?
The Honourable Minister responsible for human rights.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank the honourable member for the opposite for the question. It's a very good question. And I can tell you the Human Rights Commission in this province is something we're all very proud of. These commissioners are appointed from throughout the province. They handle many issues on a daily basis, a lot through mediation, a lot through other processes. Mr. Speaker, and I can tell you they do a wonderful job on behalf of Nova Scotians, and I have every confidence in this Board of Commissioners they will handle issues such brought forward by the member today in a very respectful way. Thank you.
The honourable member for Halifax Citadel on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's a very interesting answer because the Human Rights Commission has disagreed with the Minister. Mr. Speaker, I'll table a letter from Warren Reid, who happens to be in the Speaker's gallery this afternoon, to the Human Rights Commission regarding the lack of accessibility standards for several provincially and municipally regulated public spaces. I'll also table a reply from the Commission to Mr. Reid, which states, and I quote, "The Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission or Board of Inquiry does not have the authority to impose such amendments upon the Nova Scotia government." In other words, unless Mr. Reid has deep pockets to launch a lawsuit against the province, he's out of luck. My question to the Minister, why has the Minister left the issue of accessibility for Mr. Reid and people with mobility challenges out of the Human Rights Commission's jurisdiction?
The honourable minister responsible for human rights.
Again, Mr. Speaker, thank you, and thank the member opposite for the question. I'd agree with the member opposite. In past years, there have been many opportunities to increase awareness around barrier-free facilities in this province, Mr. Speaker. And I think, Mr. Speaker, this government deserves a lot of credit for the commitment to ensure barrier-free facilities in this province complete, Mr. Speaker, by the year 2020. Thank you.
The honourable member for Halifax Citadel on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, people with disabilities need more than awareness. They need access to public spaces and public buildings. There are far too many buildings in Halifax and Nova Scotia with substandard facilities for people with physical disabilities. Accessibility is a fundamental human right, and people with disabilities in Nova Scotia continue to go unheard on these issues. My question to the Minister of Community Services, I'm turning my question to the Minister of Community Services. My question to the Minister of Community Services is, what steps will she take through the Disabled Persons Commission to ensure that people with disabilities will have a forum in which their needs will be heard and addressed?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I thank my honourable colleague for the opportunity to rise and speak to the important work, Mr. Speaker, that's done by the Commission. There's no question, Mr. Speaker, that the work they do for the disabled community across Nova Scotia is indeed valuable. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, that's why we increased their budget this year, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that their salaries were competitive and ensure that their travel was extensive to travel across the province, Mr. Speaker, to hear about such situations my honourable colleague references. As well, Mr. Speaker, I did state during estimates the presence of Ralph Ferguson and Anne McRae, two fine members of that commission who were at a recent opening of an affordable housing project with me, Mr. Speaker. It was a celebratory moment for us because we had complete mobility access units in that facility, Mr. Speaker. And as well, it's part of our RFP component, Mr. Speaker, when we put out the RFPs for our affordable housing, that indeed they do include a barrier-free, access-free component to it, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
The honourable member for Halifax Shabukto.
Mr. Speaker,
Mr. Speaker, this question is for the Minister of Environment and Labour. Last week, the Minister stated in the media that bottled water would be addressed in the new water strategy his department announced it is in the process of developing. But what we have from the Minister is yet another plan to make a plan. What the Minister said was, quote, "We will know much more than we now do about the quality and quantity of our water. We will then build a management strategy around that information to ensure our water is sustainable," end quote, and so on. Mr. Speaker, environment ministers from successive governments have been promising Nova Scotians a water strategy for well over a decade. Mr. Speaker, why should Nova Scotians believe this one?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. They should believe this one because I said so.
The Honourable Member for Halifax-Chebucto on your first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Minister can continue saying so, or he can bring a water strategy forward. Just yesterday, Ontario actually took action to protect their water resources. One part of their plan is mandating charges for commercial and industrial users, and I will table their proposed rates. Those revenues in Ontario will be used to sponsor conservation efforts. Currently, Nova Scotia is well back when it comes to charging for water usage. So, Mr. Speaker, is this minister prepared to bring forward similar charges in Nova Scotia to those now in place in Ontario, and also ensure that those funds go towards funding water conservation efforts?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. In the water strategy that we announced on Friday, in year 2, we will be looking at that and making a decision on that in year 2, and we stated that on Friday.
The Honourable Member for Halifax-Chebucto on your final supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, successive Tory and Liberal governments have promised water strategies, and I will table announcements from 1997, 1999, the 1996 Department Business Plan, a budget bulletin from 2001, and also transcripts from debates in this House that show former Environment Minister John Leaf is probably to be credited for starting this process in 1991. And yet, last Friday, we were given another plan to make a plan. Mr. Speaker, in 19 years, does this minister not realize that enough information has been gathered and that it is time for real action on our water supply?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I simply will respond to the member opposite that those who failed to plan to fail.
The Honourable Member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Community Services. Mr. Alain Comeau is a single man from my constituency who lives, or should I say barely survives, on income assistance. Mr. Comeau receives $427 per month from the Department of Community Services, from which he must then pay his rent, transportation, groceries, and his clothes. Mr. Comeau recently contacted my office in desperate need of help. He was in excruciating pain from an abscess tooth that either needed to be extracted or needed surgery. Unfortunately, his copay for either option was more than he could afford. So my first question to the minister is, how is Mr. Comeau and all Nova Scotians who find themselves in the same painful predicament expected to pay for his dental work out of his $427 a month?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my honourable colleague for the opportunity to rise and speak about the important work, Mr. Speaker, that's being done by the ESIA department across the province, Mr. Speaker. The particular case that my honourable colleague references, of course, I wouldn't speak to the specifics. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, if I did know the specifics, but I would invite him to bring the specifics to me outside of the chamber so we can work, Mr. Speaker, to see if there is any help that we can provide to Monsieur Comeau. Mr. Speaker, I will say, though, that this government, for 3 years in a row, Mr. Speaker, increased the personal allowance for all income assistant clients, Mr. Speaker, 11% increase. And again, Mr. Speaker, in October of this year, we will be increasing that to the CPI, a commitment made by this Premier and this government, Mr. Speaker, and one that we will fulfill, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Clare on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I can tell you that's reassuring. Phew. Mr. Comeau, Mr. Speaker, it's not the only recipient of income assistance who finds himself in this position. I'm sure all members of this House have received pleading phone calls from one of their constituents who find themselves in that same position. So while $50 or $60 may not sound like much to cure excruciating pain, it may as well be $5,000 because the recipients of income assistance simply do not have the money once their living expenses are paid. So again, to the Minister, is there a discretionary fund from which caseworkers can pull monies to pay for emergency medical or dental services?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And again, to my honourable colleague, I know he brings this issue forward, Mr. Speaker, because he is concerned. Mr. Speaker, I know that for those individuals across this province who will be receiving that increase, it absolutely is reassuring to them, Mr. Speaker, that that increase will be provided for their needs, Mr. Speaker. And so I take that very seriously, Mr. Speaker, as does this government. Now, Mr. Speaker, when my honourable colleague asked the question about discretionary funds and funds provided to the caseworkers, to the frontline workers, Mr. Speaker, this government, the Department of Community Services, has committed $20 million, Mr. Speaker, in this year's budget to the special needs of those clients who need us the most, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Clare on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is simply a question of human decency and compassion. No one in this province should have to suffer through the pain that Mr. Comeau has had to endure. The co-pay system simply does not recognize the financial reality that people on income assistance live with on a daily basis. So my final question, will this government show a little compassion and ensure that Mr. Comeau and all Nova Scotians who are on income assistance get the medical and dental attention that they desperately need?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And indeed, this government, Mr. Speaker, the fine workers of the Department of Community Services show compassion each and every day, Mr. Speaker, to the individuals who find themselves in our need, Mr. Speaker, and we do so with the integrity and with the commitment, Mr. Speaker, that is of the utmost, Mr. Speaker. And so, to my honourable colleague, I would also mention that effective October the 1st, 2006, there was a 6% increase in the dental association fee, Mr. Speaker, provided through our department. As well, Mr. Speaker, we rely on our stakeholders across the province. The Dalhousie Dental School provides much assistance, Mr. Speaker, and this may very well be an opportunity where they could be able to provide assistance again, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The honourable member for Timberley Prospect.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the minister responsible for museums in this province. Across the street, each and every bus tour that arrives, children are charged $4 per visit. $4 per visit. These are parents, these are children who would like to have an opportunity to get into the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia, and that is far too expensive. I'm wondering if the minister would consider...
Order, please. Time allotted for question period has expired. Before proceeding to opposition members' business, the Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, could I have the consent of the House to revert to the order of business, tabling reports, regulations, and other papers?
The request is revert the order of business, tabling reports, regulation, and other papers. Is it agreed? The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I would like to table for the House today the public consultation meeting schedule that is directly related to the review for services for students with special needs.
Report is tabled. Opposition members' business. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to call Resolution 19.
Resolution 19. The Honourable Member for Queens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Do I read the resolution? This is in regards to Resolution 19 that was put before the House back in June '06. And where I was talking about the roads in Queens and across the province. And we all recognize that barriers to economic growth is a condition of our secondary roads and our series highways. Communities are connected through the infrastructure of secondary roads, and the well-being of communities depend on traveling without risk in safe and reasonable comfort. Our roads, especially in rural Nova Scotia, are in a deplorable state, and it is a direct result of government neglect, past and present. I would like to propose to this House that we move aggressively to resolve this deplorable state of roads. But I do want to say that I understand that there is a lot of consultation and planning that is a large part of capital project decisions. And I also understand that the budget only stretches so far, and that the priorities for roads across the province are great. That being said, I do think that we need to look at better planning options for some of our roads. I do want to indicate to the Minister and to the government that I have had good discussions with his department staff, and I certainly respect the challenging needs that they have in those planning and consultations with area supervisors and other department staff in determining what those priority roads are and how that budget will be stretched to look after those needs. I just want to talk about a few roads in the riding of Queens. We have many roads that are in serious need of repair, some through capital projects funding and some through the RIM funding. Some of the roads I'd like to talk about are the Queens Highway 210 from the airport to Trunk 8, going 2 kilometers to 10 Mile Lake. The North Queens Highway number 8 at South Brookfield. And I must say that the Department of Transportation has been very good at looking at the Highway 8 as a priority highway. It certainly is a juncture that takes us not only from Queens but into Annapolis Valley, and it is used for a number of not only tourists many months out of the year, but also for large hauling trucks, hauling lumber and other products. And this road is in need of continuing repair. And I am encouraged that the Department of Transportation has been looking very seriously at completing some of that capital project there. The Westfield Road along after Trunk 8, going into the old Westfield Road and including the Westfield Road to Rosette is a very important connector road to many of our communities in North Queens, and I am hoping that the department will also look seriously at those road needs there. The Southwest Port Mattoon Road, around Carter's Beach, is a very important road, not only for tourists, but for a lot of members of the community around Southwest Port Mattoon. And I'm told by many residents there that it has been well over 30 years since they have seen any substantial road work done in that area. And I am hopeful that the department will look at that particular road, and I'm hopeful that the department will invest in that infrastructure there. The Western Head Shore Road starting from Liverpool, the town line out to Moose Harbour is as equally important as the previous roads that I've indicated and are certainly requiring some attention. Of course, the riding of Queens also has many communities in the Lunenburg County area, and there are many roads there that are needing attention. The Petite Riviere Road on both sides of the Sperry Bridge, that's Sperry Bridge number 2, and the Green Bay Road, which is home in the Green Bay area, home to many visiting residents every year who come and spend their time in Green Bay and in and around Petite Riviere, and I'm hoping that the department seriously looks at improving some of those conditions there as well. The Crowstown Road from Conqueror Banks to Italy Cross is a very important road to many of the communities that lie on either side of that road, and that road too has been in need of repair for some time, and I'm hoping that the department will look seriously at that road. The Hurdle Road from exit 16 to Route 331. And also there are a few short roads through Lunenburg County that also require attention, including the Broad Cove Road, the Broad Cove Beach Road, and many access roads to the United Communities Harbor Authority Wharf in Vugler's Cove. There's also a road in Danesville, the Llewellyn Road, which is in very poor condition, and this particular section of road in the riding of Queens is falling in a state of disrepair rapidly because it is now seeing a lot of heavy truck traffic that travels from a quarry located nearby in Middlewood. And I've been getting calls, certainly to my office, asking if I would advocate on the residents' behalf there to indicate to the minister and the department that because of this heavy traffic, it really does need to be looked at. And of course, in the riding of Queens, we have a number of small bridges that also need to be looked at. And I do appreciate that the Department of Transportation does have a very rigorous inspection process for bridge repair throughout the province, and that it is a rigorous task, and that there are only so many inspectors, and sometimes a year just isn't enough to complete all of those inspections. But I'm hoping that some of our smaller bridges that see a lot of heavy truck traffic on a daily basis, and also school buses traveling across those structures will be given a more critical eye during the inspection process. And I understand that there is a criteria for inspecting bridges. I want to bring your attention particularly to the Salters Bridge in the community of Charleston. And the Salters Bridge, many residents who live on the Riverdale side of Charleston are very concerned that should this bridge collapse or fall further into disrepair due to the heavy traffic, that actually the community of Riverdale will be cut off from the rest of the community and will have no exit route out in the case of severe flooding, especially if that bridge was to fall to disrepair. I want to just discuss the RIM funding. And the RIM funding is a very important part of the budget. It certainly helps our area supervisors to instruct their crew to the various maintenance programs that the Department of Transportation has in place, the surface maintenance and roadside maintenance and drainage maintenance. I'm hoping that the department would consider looking at perhaps restructuring the RIM funding program in a way that actually allows more flexibility. Because I understand that the way the RIM funding program is set up, that there is X number of dollars set aside for things such as asphalt patching, gravel patching, and shoulder maintenance. Roadside maintenance would include bush cutting, and of course drainage maintenance would include ditching. So what I'm hoping is that if there was a restructuring allowed or more flexibility allowed, that if there weren't the need to see more, we'll say, guardrails, in a particular community, that the area supervisors would actually be allowed to move some of those dollars into another part of the road improvements that needed to be done, i.e. moving some guardrail monies into more asphalt patching, for example. So I'm suggesting that we perhaps need to look at restructuring that funding that's allowed, and I would encourage the minister to do that. And again, I appreciate very much the hard work of his department, and I know it's not easy with the increasing road maintenance, so thank you.
Thank you. The Honourable the Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for calling this resolution today, because it does provide an opportunity to review this government's this government's record with respect to highway and transportation initiatives since we came to power in 1999. Mr. Speaker, in 1999, the situation was that the capital budget of this department was at about $44 million. It had been absolutely devastated in the years prior to 1999. And as a result of that, and as a result of the reduction in the operating budget of the department, there grew in this province a huge infrastructure deficit with respect to roads, bridges, and the entire transportation network. This government recognized that that transportation network was essential to the sound operation of the economy of this province. It was essential for people to be able to access the services that are required in order to carry on normal life in this province, that the highway network is essential for our education system to work so that our children can get to schools safely and receive the education that they require. So as a result of understanding that priority, Mr. Speaker, this government set to work to build up the capital budget of the province with respect to transportation over the years since 1999. And we have, in fact, quadrupled that capital budget. We also understood that the fundamental problems with respect to maintenance that the honourable member referred to needed attention as well. And so we put in place the RIM program. Road Improvement Money is what RIM stands for. And that budget, Mr. Speaker, went from, I believe, about a $9 million figure in the first budget that we brought forward, first full year of our government, and we have steadily increased that. In 2003, we made a commitment to the people of the province of Nova Scotia that the RIM budget would be increased to $20 million. And that meant that we had to add $2.5 million a year since 2003 up until now. And I'm very pleased to say that in this year's budget, RIM funding is at a $20 million level. We have met the commitment that we made in the 2003 election to bring it to $20 million over a 4-year period. The honourable member is quite correct to say that the RIM funding is something that addresses a host of issues with respect to maintenance. One is the securing the paved surfaces of the roads throughout the province through a spreader patching program, which has proved to be extremely successful in providing people with a smooth transport over our roads. It has been extremely successful in preserving the life of our roads throughout the paved roads throughout the province, and getting more out of the value that we put into these roads. It also provides an opportunity to provide ditching, and all honourable members know, especially those of us who represent rural areas, that the issue of proper drainage from our roads is essential if we're going to be able to maintain those roads in a manner that will allow people the appropriate use of the road. So drainage is very important, so ditching is an essential part of the RIM program, as is graveling of the roads, Mr. Speaker. So there is a lot of money placed in that sort of program. Guardrails are an essential part of the RIM program. And with all of the, and bush cutting, as the honourable member for Digby Annapolis would be quick to remind me, is an important part of the RIM programming. Mr. Speaker, the honourable member spoke about the flexibility. I believe that there is an effort made to ensure that all of those needs are met throughout various parts of the province. Certainly, we will look at the suggestion that she had made very carefully to see if see what merit officials may feel exists with respect to flexibility. But, Mr. Speaker, I can say that the program, the essence of the RIM program is its flexibility in terms of being able to address the deficiencies in roads throughout the province. Now, Mr. Speaker, I'm mindful of the fact that okay, I do have some time. So I want to again just underline that we have, as I said, quadrupled the budget for transportation in this province, and I also indicated earlier in my remarks that we have made great progress with respect to maintenance through the RIM funding. But, Mr. Speaker, we are in no way at a point where we can say we have sufficient funds. I think I said in question period in response to an answer, despite the fact that we have quadrupled our capital budget, we could probably double that again before we would start getting to the point where we felt that all of the roads in the province are being addressed appropriately. We obviously have to deal with the main arteries and ensure that the main arteries, being our 100 series highways, are addressed appropriately, and then we deal with the collector routes that come from there, and beyond that, we're dealing with the county roads. And all honourable members in the House know that the real challenge, while we're making progress with the 100 series highways and the numbered and collected roads, that really the county roads are the ones that are a real challenge for all of us to be able to be consistent. And to that end, Mr. Speaker, I can say that, and I was reminded by my colleague, the Honourable Minister of Finance, who held the portfolio of Transportation and Public Works, that he met with the North Queens Board of Trade and did commit to a program of improving transportation link into the Caledonia area up into the park, Kejimkujik, and there has been a great improvement with respect to that. And Mr. Speaker, if we look simply at the numbers in Queens County, there's in capital over $3 million a year is spent in Queens County since we were government, or since 2002, 2003, and that is a very significant number, Mr. Speaker. In maintenance, there's well over $500,000 been expended, as much as $600,000 in some years with respect to that. And in the RIM program, Mr. Speaker, the RIM numbers gradually increased from $268,000 in 2002-2003 up to $323,000 and now at $519,395. So, Mr. Speaker, we are addressing the concerns, and I thank you very much for the time to participate in this debate.
Thank you. The honourable member for Digby Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise here in my place today and speak on this subject. It's one of my better subjects, I believe, because in my riding of Digby, which I'll try to stay to, but I can go around the province, no problem. I've been around it enough before on the roads, and I guess one place is no better than the other. But in my riding, we have 512 kilometers of road, and 150 of them is dirt roads. So if you figure that all up and go look at these roads, that's 1,024 kilometers of alders in the ditches of them, too.
Oh, alders.
But the member spoke before me about wondering about getting guardrails. Well, down home where some of them alders are, you don't need guardrails anymore. So there's a positive side to them there, that if you let them grow big enough, they make good guardrails. So, but anyway, there's a lot of them down there, And that's certainly been a big problem. And why I know about roads so much down there, I travel them as much as I can, but the biggest call that I get in that office of Digby is roads. It's roads, and the second call would be community services. But your biggest call is roads, and that's right now. Right now is the time you're getting the road calls. Because it's because of the 150 kilometers of the dirt roads that we have in that place. And when the old frost starts out in March, in the riding of Digby Annapolis, your phone rings with it. So anyway, I brought this to the attention of the minister today, earlier, about the rubber that's been done down there on a section of road in Sisebou, or South Range Road. And it's done a marvelous job. And when I heard about the tires that were going to be burned in this province and some set to Quebec, you know, it just clicked in. Well, here's a road that's been there 8 or 9 years now. They built that. They dug it down a little and put 1 foot, one solid foot, and not a solid foot, it would be flexible because it's junked up rubber big as your fist. And on top of that rubber, it took about 400 ton to do the 1 kilometer. But I figured it all up today with the 9,000 tires averaging 15 pound a piece. Well, we could get enough in the next 7 years to do all the roads in Digby Annapolis over a 7-year period of the dirt roads. So that would be quite a thing. But this road with the rubber on it, the foot of rubber, it's got about 6 inches, 5 to 6 inches of this Class A basalt rock on it. And it's gone to nearly like a pavement. It's a beautiful road. The frost don't even heave it. So anyway, I think that's worth looking into. But another thing I get a lot of calls on is when it dries up in that area. And that's a lack of chloride that they have to put on these roads. With the cutbacks and stuff, there's been no chloride. I get calls daily that people want something to keep this dust down. Well, in this kilometer of road that was built out of rubber, there is no dust. So by putting this rubber in the roads, at the dirt roads, you won't have to worry about the dust anymore because the rain over the 7 or 8 year period washed down through this 6 inches of basalt rock and cleaned it. It's beautiful rock road with a rubber base under it. It's even smooth riding. It's kind of like riding on a cloud. It's a beautiful road. And we're thinking about burning this material up. That's what bothers me. So any tires that this province don't want, you dump them down in Digby. Now I'll get a bunch of people to junk them up on the new work project this winter with a hatchet. There's a way we can do this, I'm sure. Anyway, I want to jump, and another call I got the other day too. I want to mention this because I've heard it before, but I got this from a feller who trades his car every couple of years. And he said to me, he says, Junior, I'm all done trading my car. He said, I've got the bottom, 2 years, I've got the bottom half beat out of this one. He said, I just may as well keep it for another 10 years till it's completely beat out. He said, I'm not going to go buy a new car to put on them roads. He was serious. I mean, these are the calls I get. No, I'm not joking, Mr. Speaker. It's the truth. We got the 101 down there. We're talking about twinning the highways. I put a resolution in this House today. We're spending billions of dollars trying to twin highways around, and France is over here doing away with their highways and get Bombardier to build them fast trains. Cheaper than you can build the highways over there. You're cleaning up the environment, you're cleaning up the congestion of traffic, and you're cleaning up the pollution. What great common sense the French people have got over there. But no, we're going to work on twinning the highways. But that's all right. Down home, we haven't got a single highway yet. Not a single one. People have waited 35 years. A lot of them people's died. When they were 50 years old and they were told, you're going to have a 101 highway between Digby and Weymouth here. 50, 55 years old. Them people, a lot of them's gone to their death. I've gone to their funerals. And no highway down there yet. So you got their children coming along my age, Junior, my father said 35 years ago he's going to get that highway. Are we going to go to our grave without seeing it? I said, well, I hope not. I hope that we can work and get this 20 kilometers of highway finished down here. Because the highway it's got, the 101, it's being called, is 8 feet from doorsteps. We have a big church down there in Barton. 8 feet, if sometimes when they're bringing the casket out through the door, they have to make sure the traffic isn't coming. Because when they bring it out through, they have to swing out on the road. And they're calling this the 101 down there. You know where it is, Mr. Speaker. You drive by it every time you come up here. And some of these homes, 20 feet off this road, 25 feet, with trailer trucks going through there. It says 90 kilometers an hour, but they believe it's the 101. So they're going 110 minimum. And that's what's going on in that area with people wondering whether they got to go to their grave or not, the next generation, without seeing this highway. And the minister, you know, the minister stands up over there and says, we got to get the main arteries built. Well, that's a main artery. But here we are worrying about doubling them when we should be putting one track. You're building these new trains. Now you only need one track. You don't need two. You could put one track through from western Nova Scotia to where the international ferries come in, run it right straight through this city to North Sydney, where there's another ferry going to Newfoundland. We could join all the provinces together here with a train and boats. Wonderful place. Go 500 kilometers an hour. You come to Newfoundland, leave breakfast time, be here in the city at noon. You could leave Digby and be up here to have. Well, Wayne and I go home. Mr. Speaker, you and I go home every night. Anyway, Mr. Speaker, I could go on a long while about roads, but we just can't think about trying to fix things. We got to think of the future here and what's going on. You got the city of Halifax complaining about congestion here and big trucks that can't get in, everything bottlenecked. You know, there's a cure for this. And the French are using our companies here in Quebec to do it, to cure their problems. And why aren't we doing this? Well, anyway, Mr. Speaker, with that, I'll take my seat. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The honourable member for Pictou West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to have a few minutes, too, to talk about roads and secondary roads in this province. And I want to thank the member from Queens for bringing in this resolution, a very basic issue to rural Nova Scotia and to many of the MLAs in this House. We continue to hear, as the previous speaker said, probably the #1 issue that we get in our constituency office in rural parts of the province. Maybe not in towns as much, but in most of the rural ridings, it's the #1 issue. And the resolution refers to the basic barriers to economic growth. Certainly our poor roads are hurting our economic development in this province. And it talks about the deplorable state of our rural roads resulting from years of government neglect. And there's a lot of truth in that statement. And while the minister a few minutes ago talked about further increases in the budget for transportation, even he admits that there's not enough there. And while it's gone up over the last several years, it's not near adequate for what the needs are. And in fact, the government, Mr. Speaker, had done their own study here in 2001, a 10-year needs study that outlined what it would cost to fix up all our roads. And I think if I remember correctly, it was $3.5 billion was the amount of the infrastructure deficit. And in questioning last year to the minister and deputy minister during budget estimates, it was admitted that's at least $4 billion now and growing. So the problem is getting worse, Mr. Speaker, not better. And I think it was rather disappointing to look at this year's budget and realize that, wow, you know, instead of more dollars going towards roads, actually the capital program is greatly reduced this year in Nova Scotia. Last year it was $222 million for capital improvements, and this year that's been reduced down to $145 million. So it's a step backward, Mr. Speaker. It's a step in the wrong direction. We should be putting more money into roads, not less. And So as has been mentioned by previous speakers in their ridings, there's a number of secondary roads that are in bad shape, and I would be doing a disfavor to my constituency if I didn't also mention some of the roads in Pictou West that are in great need of repair, and I want to talk for a minute, Mr. Speaker, about some of those roads. And, but it's true, you could travel in Shelburne or Kings or Cape Breton or any county in this province and find a great number of secondary roads that are in poor shape. And so I'm going to mention a couple here, a few of them from Pictou West that I think are in very poor shape. And I'll start with the Scotch Hill Road, which is a road where a former member from Pictou West still lives, and it's one of those roads that's in very, very poor shape, very rough in March and April this time of year. I'll mention the Green Hill Road over the hill from Durham to Alma is in very poor condition, sections of it. The River John Road is probably one of our worst roads, probably in all of Nova Scotia. It runs from the Sunrise Trail right through to Leatic's restaurant in River John, and the sections of that are extremely poor. I'd also include the old Pictou Road, which branches off the River John Road and heads through to Welsford towards the West Branch area. It too, Mr. Speaker, is one of the worst roads in Nova Scotia, bar none. I'll mention the Cape John Road, which had a lot of work done on it, heavy traffic over that road to the wharf project, which is now complete, and that road took quite a severe beating from heavy truck traffic and also is in need of repair. Recently, the NDP caucus, Mr. Speaker, had a retreat at the beautiful Stoneham Lodge near Scottsburn, and a number of my colleagues had the opportunity to travel over roads leading to Stoneham Lodge and experience firsthand some of the very poor quality roads that lead to that fine facility. And that is hurting business at that facility. It's hurting tourism, and no matter if you come in on the Durham Road or you come in on the Scottsburn Road or you come on the Old McLean Road, there's no easy way to get there without traveling over some very poor quality roads. I mentioned Pictou Lodge is also a fine quality resort, tourism draw in Pictou County. It's located just outside the town of Pictou and on the Three Brooks Road. And again, the quality of that road is causing problems for the operators, causing problems for tourists that want to travel to that great facility. And so as in the resolution by my colleague from Queens, it talks about the basic barriers to economic growth. And no question, when roads are causing tourists to think twice about coming back to Nova Scotia, it's causing locals to receive much damage to their vehicles. So it's really local people that are paying for the cost of these poor secondary roads, and in-car repairs for mufflers and front-end parts and wheels and tires, and on it goes. So there's a cost to local people that live in the area. There's a cost to tourism operators that are not able to receive tourists in a continuous fashion. And you know, really even economic development is hurt when roads are poor, in that you know, people may not want to establish a new business in an area if they know there's not good quality roads to drive over, which in turn maybe people don't want to move to an area, which affects you know, the number of children that might be in a local school, you know, that support a restaurant or a hardware store. So economic development is impacted certainly by poor quality roads, and you know, government has to realize that if they have a Department of Economic Development, one of the best things they could do to increase economic activity in this area is make sure they have good quality roads that that will help build economic activity in an area. So, Mr. Speaker, it's well outlined the problems that we have with our secondary roads. So, what are some of the solutions? How can we overcome this problem and build up our economic activity? Well, there's a couple of suggestions I'm going to make in the short time I have, Mr. Speaker. Certainly we need more investment. We need more dollars from the province. We need a stronger federal lobby to go to Ottawa and push for more dollars, our fair share of the gasoline tax from the federal government. I think secondly, what we need is an open, transparent priority system so people will know when their particular road is going to be repaired. We need to prioritize our road and make sure the worst road is fixed first. And based on some criteria like the number of accidents on a road or the length of time since it was last paved, the thickness of the pavement, the amount of economic activity that is or could be in an area, just the condition of the road itself. There's a number of factors that need to be determined. And then once that priority list is established, we need to make it public so people will know when their road is going to be repaired. They should be able to go online. They should be able to go to the local Department of Transportation and get the information of which roads in the province or in a particular area are going to be repaired or repaved next. And I guess the final thing is the importance of early tender calls. I noticed the minister in his own riding of Antigonish has called a number of tenders for road construction there, and it would be great if that was done around the province and all areas put out early tenders so that road repair companies can know what projects are out there. They can bid on it and plan for their year's work rather than have to wait till late in the summer or into the fall. So there's a number of things I believe the department can do, and I think secondary roads are an economic enabler, and if we work towards developing our roads, we're going to have a much more prosperous and better Nova Scotia. So I thank you for the time, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The Honourable House Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That ends debate on Resolution 19. Now I'd like to call Bill number 73.
Bill number 73. The Honourable Member for Halifax Atlantic.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm very glad to have the opportunity to speak to this bill, although I am both surprised and disappointed that this bill is only being called on an opposition day, when it has previously been to this House and passed through this House in a previous session with all party support through second reading and as far as law amendments. It surprises me, Mr. Speaker, because this bill is potentially a very important and radical shift, but beneficial shift towards the protection of the health of Nova Scotians and, in fact, the health of the Nova Scotian taxpayer's pocketbook. I am surprised, as I say, because this bill has received enthusiastic interest and perhaps endorsement from a variety of associations, including the Heart and Stroke Foundation, the Community Mental Health Association, Lung Association, Canadian Cancer Society. All of these are organizations which have a stake in it. Why? The reason these organizations have a stake in it, the reason all of us have a stake in Bill 73, is because there are Nova Scotians today who are ill and who cannot afford their medications. They choose either to suffer or to eat. I can give you examples of people, Mr. Speaker, who are paying $900 a month for medications out of their pockets. And for some people, that drives them to community services. And at that point, the Nova Scotia taxpayer supports them. For other people, it means that they live in a very, very meager fashion and frequently with chronic disease. How is this happening, and why is this happening? This is because these are people, like many Nova Scotians, who have been employed or have been married to someone who is employed, have been the child of somebody who is employed, and a part of that employment was health insurance. We know how important it is in this day and age when prescription drugs are an extraordinary cost, when surgeries are available that can save lives in the absolute sense, that can save lives in the sense of delivering people from profound suffering, which can last a lifetime. We're turning our backs on them. We're turning our backs on them because these people who have paid insurance premiums and whose families have paid insurance premiums for years and years and years have suddenly had their backs turned on them by the insurance companies to whom they pay those premiums. And I think it's reprehensible that we're not allowing this to happen, that we're allowing this to happen. This is what takes place when somebody gets married at 19 years of age to somebody who's perhaps 22 years of age, who has a job and who has health insurance. The 19-year-old is obviously somebody in a very different condition of health from what he or she is at 45 years old, when perhaps the marriage breaks up, perhaps the employed person dies. That person's health has probably experienced a lot of ups and downs, and that person has quite possibly been to a doctor, has consulted somebody about a stomachache, a headache, has perhaps been treated for depression, and may manifest none of those conditions whatsoever. But when the health insurance disappears, that person has to go out and find new health insurance, entirely new health insurance. And that person, as they say, you can never step in the same river twice. It's never the same person twice who's being insured. That person is a very different person at the age of 45 from what they were at 19. And every single time they've been to a doctor is on the record, and they are forced to take coverage which says only that they will not be covered for any conditions potentially related to what has been seen. I'm hesitant to say where they have found a model to deal with this, but it is in the United States. And interestingly, in the United States, they feel it is important to ensure continuity of health insurance coverage. And this is where the stakes are an awful lot higher, as you know, an awful lot higher. And in fact, the health insurance companies will find themselves paying for out-and-out surgery, not just the prescription drugs. And mercifully, we're not in that situation. But the companies there do have to provide a window of time during which somebody who's lost their insurance because of widowhood, because of divorce, because of layoff, loss of job, anything that has deprived them of their health insurance coverage and left them looking for a new kind of coverage because they're a new kind of person 20 or 25 years later. We need to ensure that people can, in fact, within a reasonable window of time, get new coverage, because it's a windfall. Every time you pay 35 years worth of health insurance premiums and then you fall off the rolls before reaching the age of 65, I might add, at which point seniors pharmacare kicks in. Every time you fall off the insurance rolls, the insurance company to whom you've paid premiums and to whom your employer has paid premiums can strike you off the books. You are no longer relevant. You are not relevant to any future employer. And as I say, I have constituents who have been driven into poverty by bills that should have been covered because they have faithfully paid insurance premiums and their employers have paid insurance premiums for years and years and years. And as I say, accident, widowhood, divorce, loss of job, as we saw today, even the closure of a factory can mean the end of a job, the end of health insurance, and all of a sudden somebody is stricken, is out in the cold. Not just even on that day, but for the future. Because if that person, the person who previously had a job, who previously was married to someone who had a job, who previously was married to somebody who had health insurance, that person is suddenly no longer eligible for coverage for anything related to anything that happened to them back in the days when they were married, when they did have a job. And Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry that the province of Nova Scotia is having to pick up the tab for all these people who have been driven into abject poverty because the insurance company they paid has turned its back on them. I'm not suggesting that an insurance company should be required to take on all comers. There's a window of time. It's within a fairly brief window of time. It's 3 to 6 months, or it's actually 3 to 6 months, depending on the reason for the loss of coverage, in which American insurers are obligated to take up new insured on similar conditions. The other thing I might add is the joy of the pre-existing condition. If a condition hasn't manifested itself in 5 or 7 or 10 years, then these insurers do, in fact, have to look at it as something that's not pre-existing. If the person I gave an example of at 19 years old went to a doctor for a headache and received whatever prescription, or even didn't receive a prescription, received a consult, spends all that time carrying health insurance under which they would be covered, and never again complains of anything related to a headache until the age of 45, when they lose their coverage, and at 46 they have a headache, all of a sudden they've got to go buy those pills for themselves. And if it's a serious headache and it needs serious medication, they will be very lucky indeed if they are not forced to turn to the charity of strangers or the charity of the province, but most certainly not to the charity of the people they have paid for years to take care of them. And that, Mr. Speaker, is why I would like to see this bill brought forward at least for debate in this House, at least for debate and consideration. It's foolish not to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. The Honourable, the Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And first of all, I'd like to begin by saying that I am pleased today to rise to speak on this bill, Bill 73, the Health Insurance Protection Act. There is no doubt that the government recognizes how important it is for Nova Scotians to have appropriate access to affordable health insurance. However, Mr. Speaker, we believe more cost analysis and consultation is required with the insurance industry, employers and employees, before legislation can move forward in the House. Bill 73 relates to both group health and individual insurance plans, and calls for measures in the areas of pre-existing conditions, renewing coverage, and notifying beneficiaries of coverage change. To look at what these changes would mean to the insurance industry and to employers and employees, we must first consider the difference between group health and individual health insurance plans. Group insurance is voluntarily offered by employers, unions, alumni associations, credit unions, and so on. Individual plans, on the other hand, are purchased by individuals for protection of themselves and their families. Currently, individual health insurance plans are an extremely small yet important component of private health insurance in Nova Scotia. Across the province, group health insurance plans account for well over 99% of coverage provided and the benefits paid to Nova Scotians. There are approximately 630,000 Nova Scotians covered by group health insurance plans and about 4,100 with individual coverage. As I stated earlier, Mr. Speaker, the small take-up of individual health insurance in no way reduces the importance of that type of coverage to those people who purchase it on behalf of themselves and their families. While quite often both plans offer similar coverage, they often have significant differences. To begin, Mr. Speaker, group plans generally do not include medical underwriting of plan members. These plans pool the risk and resources across the entire group and their dependents, thereby spreading the cost of insurable items and events over all participants. However, of course, because they also take that into consideration, a small group with a number of very, very sick members may have an incredibly high cost to the employer and to the employees who tend to co-share in the insurance. And we need to make sure that those plans are affordable for not only employers, but also for the employees, or else we could be in a situation where unwittingly we discouraged employers from offering this valuable type of protection to their employees. This, however, is not the case with individual insurance plans. Individual insurance plans involve medical underwriting for each applicant to ensure premiums are in line with the risk assumed by the insurance company involved. As well, Mr. Speaker, pre-existing conditions are typically not included in group extended health plans because they form an integral part of individual health plans. Pre-existing condition clauses are often used by insurance companies to reduce or limit access to insurance. Mr. Speaker, we certainly understand and appreciate the concern around insurance companies using pre-existing condition clauses, especially given our aging population and increased rates of cancer and other conditions. However, I'd like to take a moment to discuss the possible impacts of Bill 73 in this area. And again, we need more study. So these are just some of the issues that have been raised. The proposed act calls for the elimination of any pre-existing condition after a 12-month period of no treatment for that condition. Furthermore, Bill 73 would see a person with a pre-existing condition who moved to a new plan within 30 days of terminating a prior plan being covered for the same terms and conditions relating to that pre-existing condition as in the preceding health plan. Mr. Speaker, on the surface, that sounds like a worthwhile objective. But when you look at the impact on these proposals, you discover that insurance affordability could become more of an issue for respect to the new plan that you're moving forward. For example, a group that may be saddled with an individual or individuals who have incredibly high demands on the plan. If this change were to come into effect, and if insurance were not permitted to use a pre-existing condition clause, the insurers would most likely need to increase premiums to compensate for that additional risk. Or insurance may simply stop offering insurance to individuals with pre-existing conditions because the perceived risk would be disproportional to the premiums. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure we can all agree that that wouldn't be a good outcome as well. We know there are various reasons that some people seek medical coverage. They may be, for instance, changing jobs or retiring from the workforce, or they may be recently divorced or widowed. Or widowered, I guess is the other verb, the noun rather. The last thing any of us would want is to see someone moving to a new insurance policy with a pre-existing condition such as breast cancer to be refused for insurance. And we're all obviously very cognizant of the problems that that poses. Because of this, we need to make sure that any measures we put in place are the right ones that will indeed break down the barriers, not create new ones, which will encourage more Nova Scotians to have private plans, not fewer plans. Mr. Speaker, the proposed act also calls for the insurer, which would mean, depending on the type of insurance, either the employer or the insurance company, to notify those insured or their dependents or spouses of their rights under the act in the case of the death of the insured, the loss of employment, or the divorce of that person. Again, on the surface, it sounds like a reasonable request, but Mr. Speaker, again, it comes with challenges, especially with respect to communication of personal information. Usually with respect to the death of an insured person, it is up to the insured person's spouse, dependents, or beneficiary to notify the insurer. In most cases, once informed of death, the insurer has some role in communicating coverage changes and available options. Excuse me, Mr. Speaker. However, with respect to the loss of employment or divorce, privacy concerns prevail, making it highly inappropriate for an insurer to communicate information with someone other than the person insured. And I might add, Mr. Speaker, that having some experience in this field as a lawyer who represented clients in the family law area, in many cases, Mr. Speaker, the spouse, the non-insured spouse, is represented by legal counsel, and certainly it was my practice to communicate to my clients the effect of termination of coverage on them in the event of divorce, so that in many cases they are aware of that situation and are aware of the situation that will face them once the divorce decree becomes final and they are no longer the spouse of the person and therefore not to be affected. I might also add another challenge is with respect to new spouses, because you have a situation where if you were to retain in that situation, you could have multiple spouses under a plan, which obviously would put a much greater cost to the insurer because this person may be remarrying, may have a spouse, and they would not want to be in a situation where the insured's current spouse would not be able to be covered under the plan. So it is a little more complicated than it may look. As I stated, Nova Scotians have to have access to affordable health insurance. That's why the government has made a significant commitment of $89.6 million this year on pharmacare to assist seniors, income assistance recipients, and children of low-income parents. And, Mr. Speaker, we're going to spend $5 million this year on a new publicly subsidized prescription drug insurance plan for working families. Mr. Speaker, that's a plan that will begin on March the 1st of 2008 and will fill in the void in insurance that many Nova Scotian families are feeling today. At the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, our goal is to make health insurance more affordable and to accessible to all Nova Scotians, and Nova Scotia's universal health insurance program and pharmacare program make us much closer to reaching that goal. Mr. Speaker, we know there's more needed, and we will continue to study this issue and to try to provide the best solutions for Nova Scotian families, both through publicly provided insurance and privately provided insurance. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
It's an interesting debate, and I congratulate the member for Halifax Atlantic for bringing it forward because, you know, you really don't know what's at the end of a road until you've traveled that road. And I personally have traveled the road that we're talking about here today. When I lost my job in 1998 after approximately 20 years with the same employer and full drug coverage and full dental coverage for myself and my family, I found myself, after being terminated from that job, without insurance, without health insurance. And I can tell you, I don't recall in my lifetime ever having a bigger shock than when I found out about the fact of how much private health insurance would cost me. I was absolutely flabbergasted when I checked into it. With at the time, I can recall calling Blue Cross, I believe it was, to get an estimate on how much a private plan would actually cost me. It was hundreds of dollars per month that it would cost me for myself and my family. But what I also found out, and it's the subject that we're talking about here today, is that pre-existing prescriptions were not covered. So in other words, and I think at that time I was taking medication for I think at that time it was an ulcer, which have doubled since I've become an MLA, by the way. But I was taking medication for treatment for ulcers, and I was told that, okay, we can give you health coverage. And yes, I said, I guess I'll have to pay the money because I have to have coverage for drug coverage in case something happens, and dental coverage for my children and so on. They said, no, I'm sorry, we can't cover that existing prescription that you have, or that existing condition. In other words, it simply wasn't available. I couldn't get it. So, you know, having traveled that road, it makes me extremely interested in Bill number 73. And if I recall, at the time, I was at the ripe old age of 42 when that occurred to me, and you know, had never thought about. And there's another interesting point that's made in the debate on this bill today, is that, you know, if not simply because you lost a job of your own accord, in this day and age, from a recent survey that I saw, it shows that normally now in your lifetime you will probably change jobs about 7 times in the course of your lifetime right now, which is quite average in the day and age that we live. So I guess there are, you know, I can see a number. It is. The divorce rate is right up there too, as the honourable member mentions as well. It's the benefits here, I guess, are that it does ensure the portability of insurability despite pre-existing condition. There is, and the member for Halifax Atlantic referenced the fact reluctantly that this was linked, that this came from the United States. This is where this originates, and I share her nervousness in mentioning that, because, you know, there is a study in the U.S. that shows that people with chronic illness are 40% less likely to move jobs because they're dependent on the employer's insurance plan. Okay, in other words, they lose a chance of perhaps bettering themselves, making more money, whatever the case may be, because they're linked to that insurance plan that's there. And we all know that insurance is more and more expensive, and that plans are currently not transferable, and that you'll lose your coverage if you change your employment. And as I mentioned, it's not the same environment of, you know, like the lifetime employees and the employers were taking care of you. I would argue the fact, Mr. Speaker, that perhaps there's not as much employer loyalty anymore as there used to be out there in the workforce as well. I guess in some of the concerns that we would have deal with the pre-existing condition, which does not include, for instance, a routine follow-up for breast cancer, or genetic information in absence of diagnosis of the condition, whatever, you know. We have some concerns around that area as well. And I guess we also share some concerns that the government has mentioned as well, and that is the ultimate question of who's going to pay for all of this, and where does the money come from, and if indeed And as I said, on the surface, it's a good idea, but if indeed it goes ahead, if this were to go ahead, will the insurance companies simply eat up the cost by passing on the cost to rate increases to their customers and so on, and you know, who ends up paying for it all? The U.S., as I mentioned, does have portable coverage, but the premiums, from what I've read, the premiums are very high, and I'm not. I do, and I just, because of that, just leads me to wonder exactly who's going to pay for it and what happens. So it's again, as I mentioned, Mr. Speaker, I'm intrigued by the debate here today, and I know that I can see that a lot of thought has gone into the bill, and you know, it has a great side to it, because the fact of that. You know, if the insurer would insure anyone that is previously covered under an insurance plan, that you know, immediately preceding the new plan, that is covered. This is, as I understand it, under the new plan for purposes of pre-existing conditions, if insured persons apply for coverage within 30 days of the expiry of the previous plan, and as I said, the member for Halifax Atlantic is saying here that there's that window that's available there. So it's not something that would last forever, and it's not something that you would say has to be there forever and a day. There is that window of opportunity that's there, and it covers a wide-ranging area. So I guess in a roundabout way, I might as well get to the point. I'm probably saying that we support the bill that's being put forward, and you know, as I mentioned, it was especially of interest to me, because I can imagine, and I know the minister has made reference to only a relatively small number of people who would be involved in private insurance plans in Nova Scotia in terms of the thousands, but still, I would suggest that there are probably people out there who have none, because they simply can't afford it, and I would be interested in hearing those numbers as well. You know, we know in this case, in a lot of cases, for instance, and you know yourself, Mr. Speaker, you raised in question period today a concern about a client of community services who simply could not afford to have dental work done, and you know, we know how costly that can be. So we know that this would certainly, and I would say that probably there are people who are not receiving the proper health care in this case, because they simply can't afford a private insurance plan, and they're not on a company insurance plan or any kind of coverage plan like that. And some insurance companies would offer personal insurance coverage as well, as I understand it, that will actually move with you now from where you work to where you work. And perhaps, you know, the onus here should be more so on the insurance companies, you know, because certainly we know that they make multi-millions of dollars, and that their profits are huge. And if anybody should be looking after the situation, then perhaps if you're looking for people with money, look no further than insurance companies. They have plenty of it. But having said that, Mr. Speaker, again, you know, our caucus would certainly be more than open to pursuing this debate further and hearing more of it. And we're certainly find ourselves in agreement for the most part with the member from Halifax Atlantic. Thank you.
The honourable member for Halifax Needham.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to have an opportunity to rise and speak in support of Bill 73. And I want to commend my colleague, the member from Halifax Atlantic, for bringing this legislation forward. And because I think what we can't lose sight of in this debate, Mr. Speaker, is who will benefit from this debate. And I have to say I'm disappointed in the government's intervention, in the minister's intervention with respect to this bill, and the fact that they indicate they need more study. Mr. Speaker, I listened to what the minister had to say very carefully, because I was very puzzled about why a government that initially seemed very keen about this legislation has gotten cold feet. And I think that we need more study, if I can put it in parenthesis, Mr. Speaker, is code for saying there's no way we're moving this bill anywhere toward passage. And it indicates to me that the government is becoming an apologist for the insurance industry, Mr. Speaker, rather than an advocate for Nova Scotians who really need health care coverage that they don't get in the public system. And I want to put a human face on this, Mr. Speaker. In the course of representing people from the particular part of the province that I have the privilege of representing, I have had a student who is a student with diabetes who was in her final year of university at Acadia on her father's health care plan, but his ability to cover her and all of the needs that she had with respect to juvenile diabetes, which she had had from a very young age, her inclusion in his plan would end when she reached a particular age or she was no longer a student. And at probably 9 months prior to her graduation, she and her family started looking for another insurance plan. And she ran smack up against the pre-existing condition provisions that insurance companies use. And it's not that she couldn't get coverage in another plan. Let's be clear, she could have gotten coverage. But the cost, the monthly premiums that she would pay were ridiculous. They were, $600–700. And so the premiums were prohibitive. They far, far exceeded what any of her particular health care needs were. And so there she was, a young person who was unable to get coverage. She couldn't afford it. Now, this bill would actually assist a young person like that. They would be able to have this 30-day window. The insurance industry wouldn't be able to gouge someone in terms of the premiums, and they could continue on with their payments. Another individual I've had, and I brought the case of Irene Larkin to this legislature, Mr. Speaker. Here's a woman with some very serious acute illnesses, life-threatening illnesses, very, very large medical drug costs on a monthly basis, and covered under her mother's plan until she got married. And once she was married, she was no longer eligible for coverage, and her drug costs were in excess of $1,200 a month, and those were her drug costs. That didn't account for other kinds of things. This is a woman who was frequently hospitalized and would be able to use her health care, her insurance coverage for things like ambulance fees, for things like having a semi-private room in a hospital, and all of that was wiped out. And she had no ability to get a new health plan, Mr. Speaker, without paying premiums that were just astronomical and far, far beyond her actual costs. And I had a third constituent who had scleroderma. And again, life-threatening disease, multiple pharmaceutical needs, frequent hospitalizations, use of the emergency health services, and due to divorce, marriage breaking down, and a divorce no longer covered by her husband's plan and unable to get health insurance. So, Mr. Speaker, these These are the real people who are affected by this government's intransigence on this particular bill. And the minister talks about we need more study and there's a difference between individual plans and group plans. I would say to the minister, he put a fair amount of emphasis on group plans and concerns that the government have about those and the cost to the insurance industry, because this is where the bulk of the coverage is. Then let's move this bill ahead into law amendments and amend the bill so at least individuals can get individual plans. This is why I'm very skeptical about this idea that we're going to be studying it. I don't think they're going to be studying it at all. There's no will to move this bill and amend this bill, even in a way that a small number of people could realize the benefits from this bill. And to end in the debate with the minister talking about their non-existing working families pharmacare program. I mean, pharmacare is only a small part of why people need public insurance, public health or private health insurance. There's vision care, there's dental care, there's physiotherapy, there's, as I said, the ambulance fees, Mr. Speaker. There are semi-private rooms if you're hospitalized, and there are any variety of drugs that aren't covered if you're in a public plan. So I think that the government is being disingenuous when they say they're studying this bill. It's a clear indication to me that they're not prepared to amend this bill. Even so, a small number of people will benefit, and this is, I think, it's very sad. And I want to say as well, I object to the idea that the insurance industry is, quote unquote, as the minister said, being saddled with anyone. People who have serious illnesses are not saddling the insurance industry. Quite the contrary, Mr. Speaker. I think that the insurance companies would prefer never to have to pay a claim, never to provide any coverage, and never take any risk. And that's becoming increasingly clear in the auto area, in the house area, around the volunteer sector, and indeed with respect to people with illnesses and disease, Mr. Speaker. And with that, I'll take my seat.
Thank you. Time has expired for debate on Bill number 73. The Honourable House Leader of the Official Opposition.
That closed our business for today, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, sir. The Honourable the Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that the House be adjourned to sit again tomorrow beginning at 9 a.m. to 5. Following the daily routine will be question period in the Committee of the Whole House on Supply.
Thank you. The motion before the House is for the House to rise and meet again tomorrow at the hour of 9 a.m. All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Aye. All those against, motion carried. The House will sit tomorrow between the hours of 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. The House stands adjourned until 9 a.m. tomorrow. Thank you.